Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always believed that hard work and dedication would be enough to earn respect on the military base. She was wrong. As one of only 12 women among 300 personnel at Forward Operating Base Phoenix, she faced challenges that went far beyond the demanding desert environment and complex logistics operations. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning in the Communications Center. Staff Sergeant Rick Morrison had been making comments for weeks, starting small with remarks about her appearance that made her skin crawl. Other soldiers noticed but looked away, unwilling to get involved in what they saw as inevitable drama between a female officer and a senior enlisted man with connections. Sarah tried to handle it professionally at first. She documented every incident in her personal log, hoping the behavior would stop if she remained strictly professional. When Morrison commented on her uniform being too tight in all the right places during a morning briefing, she pulled him aside afterward. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, your comments about my appearance are inappropriate and need to stop immediately," she said firmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Morrison laughed, stepping closer than regulation distance allowed. "Come on, Lieutenant. Can't take a compliment? You military women are all the same, uptight and frigid." The conversation ended there, but Sarah knew it wouldn't be the last. Morrison had friends throughout the base, men who had served together for years and formed tight bonds that excluded outsiders, especially women. She was fighting an uphill battle in an environment where speaking up could damage her career prospects. Things escalated the following week during night shift operations. Sarah was alone in the communications center, monitoring radio traffic from nearby outposts when Morrison entered. His usual smirk was replaced by something darker, more predatory. He had been drinking. She could smell alcohol on his breath, which was strictly forbidden on base. "Working late again, Lieutenant?" Morrison asked, closing the door behind him and turning the lock. The click echoed in the small room filled with radio equipment and computer monitors. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She positioned herself near the emergency button that would alert the duty officer, but Morrison noticed her movement and stepped to block her path. The room suddenly felt much smaller than its actual dimensions. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, you need to leave immediately. You're clearly intoxicated, and this behavior is completely unacceptable," Sarah said, her voice carrying the authority of her rank despite her internal alarm bells ringing loudly. Morrison's expression turned ugly. "You think you're better than everyone else because you wear those bars? I've been in this army longer than you've been breathing, little girl. Time someone taught you your place." He moved toward her with obvious intent, his hands reaching out to grab her shoulders. Sarah backed against the radio console, her mind racing through defensive options. The room had no windows, one locked door, and Morrison was significantly larger than her. But she had trained for this scenario, both in combat courses and in the self-defense classes she had taken before joining the military. "Stay back," she warned, raising her hands in a defensive position. "This is your last chance to walk away before this becomes something that destroys your career." Morrison laughed harshly. "Who's going to believe you? It's your word against mine, and I've got friends in high places. Besides, accidents happen in combat zones. Communications equipment can be dangerous if handled improperly." The threat was clear and terrifying. Sarah realized that Morrison had planned this carefully, choosing a time and place where he believed he could act without consequences. The isolation of the base, the male-dominated environment, and the culture of silence around such incidents had emboldened him to believe he was untouchable. As Morrison lunged forward, Sarah dropped low and pivoted, using his momentum against him. Her elbow connected with his solar plexus, causing him to double over and gasp for air. She moved toward the door, but Morrison recovered faster than expected and grabbed her arm, spinning her around violently. "You're going to regret that," he snarled, his grip tightening painfully on her wrist. "Nobody disrespects me and gets away with it." Sarah drove her knee upward, aiming for his groin, but Morrison twisted aside, and the blow glanced off his thigh. His other hand came up toward her face, and she realized that this situation was escalating beyond harassment into potential assault. The communication radios crackled with routine traffic from other bases, a surreal backdrop to the violence unfolding in the room. Just as Morrison's hand reached her throat, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. The sound was distinctive, the measured pace of senior officers making an unscheduled inspection. Morrison heard it too and hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. "Help!" Sarah shouted as loudly as she could. "Emergency and Communications Center?" Morrison's eyes widened with panic. He had counted on having time and privacy to carry out whatever he had planned. The approaching footsteps meant exposure, investigation, and the end of his military career. He released Sarah and stepped back, his face cycling through emotions from rage to fear to desperate calculation. The footsteps stopped outside the door, followed by authoritative knocking. "Open this door immediately!" came a voice that carried the weight of serious rank and zero tolerance for delays. Morrison looked at Sarah with hatred and desperation. "This isn't over," he whispered. "You have no idea what you've started." But Sarah could see in his eyes that he knew exactly what he had started, and how badly it was about to end for him. The generals had arrived. The door handle rattled with increasing force as Morrison frantically tried to think of an explanation for the locked communication center. Sarah stood near the radio console, her uniform disheveled and her face flushed from the struggle. The evidence of what had been happening was written clearly in the scene: overturned chair, scattered papers, and the smell of alcohol in the small room. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, open this door now, or we will have it open for you," came the voice again, even more commanding than before. Morrison's hands shook as he reached for the lock. He whispered urgently to Sarah, "If you say anything, I'll make sure everyone on this base knows you're a troublemaker. Your career will be over before it starts." But Sarah had moved beyond fear into cold determination. She straightened her uniform and prepared to face whatever came next. Years of military training had taught her that truth and proper procedures were her strongest weapons, especially when dealing with superior officers. The lock clicked open, and the door swung inward to reveal 3 men in desert camouflage uniforms. Their rank insignia immediately commanded attention. General Patricia Hawkins, a stern woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. General Marcus Torres, a decorated combat veteran whose reputation for integrity was legendary throughout the military, and General David Chen, the base commander whose surprise inspection had brought them to this moment. The silence in the room was deafening as the 3 generals took in the scene. General Hawkins noticed immediately that the door had been locked from the inside, highly unusual for a communications center that needed to remain accessible for emergencies. General Torres observed Morrison's defensive posture and the obvious signs that he had been drinking. General Chen saw Sarah's torn sleeve and the defensive position she maintained near the emergency alert button. "What exactly is happening here?" General Hawkins asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Her question was directed at both soldiers, but her eyes focused primarily on Morrison, whose guilt was written across his face in obvious lines of panic and desperation. Morrison attempted to stand at attention, but his intoxicated state made the movement sloppy and unprofessional. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Martinez and I were discussing communications protocols for the night shift. We were just finishing up." The explanation sounded weak, even to Morrison himself. General Torres stepped closer, and his experienced nose immediately detected the alcohol odor that Morrison couldn't hide. In a combat zone where alcohol was strictly prohibited, this alone constituted a serious violation worthy of court-martial. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, have you been drinking?" General Torres asked bluntly. Military protocol demanded direct questions when violations were apparent. and generals didn't waste time with diplomatic language when dealing with potential criminal behavior. Sarah watched Morrison struggle with his response, knowing that lying to a general officer was a career-ending offense that would add to his already serious problems. The three generals represented decades of military experience and had undoubtedly seen every type of situation that could occur on a military base. "Lieutenant Martinez," General Chen said, turning his attention to Sarah, "please explain what happened here tonight. Take your time and give us a complete report." Sarah felt the weight of the moment. Her next words would determine not only Morrison's fate, but also set a precedent for how such incidents would be handled on the base. She looked at the three generals, saw their serious expressions, and realized that these were officers who would listen to the truth and act on it appropriately. "Sir, Staff Sergeant Morrison entered the communications center approximately 10 minutes ago while I was monitoring radio traffic. He was clearly intoxicated and locked the door behind him. He made inappropriate comments about my position as a female officer and attempted to physically assault me. I defended myself using appropriate force, and his actions were interrupted by your arrival." The words came out clearly and professionally, each fact delivered without emotion, but with complete accuracy. Sarah knew that military justice required precise reporting, and she had learned to document incidents with the detail that would be necessary for formal proceedings. General Hawkins stepped closer to Morrison, who was now visibly sweating despite the air conditioning in the communications center. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations?" Morrison's mouth opened and closed several times as he searched for words that might salvage his situation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The locked door, his obvious intoxication, Sarah's torn uniform, and the defensive wounds on his arms where she had fought back during their struggle. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Lieutenant Martinez misinterpreted my actions. I was just trying to be friendly and welcome her to the base community. Sometimes military women misread normal social interactions as harassment." The response revealed Morrison's fundamental misunderstanding of his situation. General Torres exchanged glances with his colleagues, and their expressions showed exactly what they thought of his explanation. Three generals with combined experience of over 70 years in military service were not going to be fooled by obviously false explanations. General Chen moved to the communication console and began examining the radio logs, checking timestamps and duty rosters to verify Sarah's account of her activities before Morrison's arrival. Military investigations required thorough documentation, and generals understood the importance of building cases that would hold up in court-martial proceedings. "Lieutenant Martinez," General Hawkins said, "you mentioned that Staff Sergeant Morrison made threats. Can you be specific about what was said?" Sarah recounted Morrison's words exactly, including his threats about her career and his claims about having friends in high places who would protect him. She also described his escalating behavior over the previous weeks, the pattern of inappropriate comments, and her attempts to address the situation through proper channels. General Torres turned to Morrison with an expression of disgust. "Staff Sergeant, you are confined to quarters pending a full investigation. You will surrender your weapon and all access cards immediately. Military police will escort you to your quarters, and you will remain there until formal charges are filed." Morrison's face went white as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his alcohol-clouded judgment. Being confined to quarters was the first step in a process that would likely end with court-martial, conviction, and discharge from the military with loss of all benefits and privileges. "Generals, please, this is all a big misunderstanding. I've served honorably for 15 years. My record speaks for itself. Lieutenant Martinez is new here and doesn't understand how things work in combat zones." But General Hawkins was already reaching for her radio to summon military police. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, your 15 years of service make this incident more serious, not less. You are expected to set an example for junior personnel, not prey upon them." The radio crackled to life as General Chen called for immediate backup. Within minutes, the base would be in full emergency mode as word spread that 3 generals had personally intervened in what appeared to be a serious criminal incident involving a female officer. Within 30 minutes of the general's discovery, forward operating Base Phoenix transformed into a different place entirely. Military police arrived to escort Morrison to confinement while medical personnel examined Sarah for injuries. General Chen issued orders that locked down all non-essential activities until a complete investigation could be conducted. The base rumor mill, normally filled with speculation about deployment schedules and leave rotations, buzzed with shocked whispers about what had happened in the communications center. Soldiers who had previously ignored Morrison's inappropriate behavior suddenly remembered incidents they had witnessed but failed to report. The culture of silence that had protected predators was cracking under the weight of serious consequences. Sarah found herself in the base medical facility, where Navy corpsmen documented her injuries and collected evidence. The torn sleeve, bruising on her wrist where Morrison had grabbed her, and defensive wounds on her hands painted a clear picture of what had occurred. Each photograph and medical notation would become part of a case that military prosecutors would build with methodical precision. General Hawkins personally interviewed Sarah for over 2 hours, taking detailed statements about not just the incident itself, but the pattern of harassment that had preceded it. The general's questions were thorough and professional, designed to build a comprehensive understanding of the hostile environment that Morrison had created through his behavior. "Lieutenant Martinez," General Hawkins said during a break in the interview, "I want you to understand something important. What happened tonight was not your fault, and your decision to defend yourself and report this incident shows exactly the kind of courage we need in our military. Too many incidents like this go unreported because victims fear retaliation or don't believe they'll be supported." The investigation that followed was swift and comprehensive. General Torres ordered a complete review of Morrison's service record, which revealed a troubling pattern that had been overlooked or ignored by previous commanders. Complaints from female personnel at his previous assignments had been dismissed as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. The pattern showed a predator who had learned to operate within a system that failed to protect his victims, Morrison's friends and supporters. The network of senior enlisted men he had claimed would protect him disappeared completely once the generals became involved. Military careers that spanned decades could be destroyed by association with criminal behavior, and self-preservation instincts kicked in quickly among those who had previously enabled his conduct. The court-martial proceedings began within a week, an unusually fast timeline that demonstrated the military's commitment to taking the case seriously. Morrison's military-appointed defense counsel advised him to negotiate a plea agreement, but Morrison's arrogance led him to reject reasonable offers and demand a full trial, where he believed he could convince a military jury that Sarah had misunderstood his intentions. Sarah testified clearly and professionally, presenting facts without emotion while describing the harassment campaign that had culminated in attempted assault. Her credibility was enhanced by the thorough documentation she had maintained and the physical evidence collected immediately after the incident. The prosecution built a case that left no room for doubt about Morrison's guilt. The defense strategy of portraying Morrison as a misunderstood veteran whose friendly gestures had been misinterpreted by an inexperienced female officer backfired completely. Military juries, composed of experienced service members, recognized predatory behavior when they saw it. Morrison's claims about his honorable service record were undermined by evidence of previous incidents that had been covered up by commanders who prioritized unit cohesion over justice. Morrison was convicted on multiple charges including assault, conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer, violation of alcohol policies, and fraternization violations. The military judge sentenced him to reduction in rank to private, forfeiture of all pay and allowances, 6 months confinement at military correctional facility, and dishonorable discharge from the military. His 15-year career ended in disgrace, with loss of all veteran benefits and a criminal record that would follow him for life. But the real changes at Forward Operating Base Phoenix went far beyond Morrison's conviction. General Chen implemented comprehensive reforms that addressed the cultural problems that had enabled Morrison's behavior. Mandatory training sessions on sexual harassment and assault prevention became monthly requirements rather than annual formalities. Reporting procedures were streamlined to ensure that complaints reached senior leadership immediately rather than being buried in paperwork by middle management. The three generals used Morrison's case as an example throughout the military justice system, speaking at leadership conferences about the importance of taking immediate action when harassment or assault allegations emerged. Their intervention became a model for how senior leadership should respond to such incidents, prioritizing victim safety and thorough investigation over unit reputation or convenience. Sarah's career flourished in the aftermath of her courageous stand. Her professional competence, combined with her demonstration of integrity under pressure, marked her as leadership material for rapid promotion. She received commendations from the generals involved and was selected for advanced training programs that would prepare her for senior leadership positions. More importantly, the base culture shifted permanently. Female personnel no longer felt isolated and vulnerable when reporting inappropriate behavior. Male service members understood that harassment would result in swift and severe consequences, regardless of rank or connections. The buddy system that had protected predators was replaced by a command climate that valued professionalism and respect for all personnel. Morrison's supporters, those who had claimed he was being unfairly targeted by an oversensitive female officer, found themselves under increased scrutiny. Several received formal counseling sessions about appropriate behavior and professional standards. The message was clear. Enabling or covering up harassment would result in career consequences for everyone involved. The changes implemented at Forward Operating Base Phoenix became a template used throughout the military. Sarah's case was studied in leadership schools as an example of how proper reporting, thorough investigation, and appropriate consequences could transform unit culture and prevent future incidents. Her experience showed that the military justice system could work effectively when senior leadership took their responsibilities seriously. Years later, Sarah would rise to senior leadership positions herself, always remembering the night when three generals walked into a communications center and changed everything. She would use her experience to mentor younger service members, both male and female, about the importance of maintaining professional standards and supporting colleagues who faced harassment or assault. Morrison's attempt to silence her through intimidation and violence had instead amplified her voice throughout the military. His career ended in disgrace while hers flourished, proving that courage and integrity ultimately triumph over predatory behavior when good leaders are willing to act decisively to protect their personnel. The communications center where the incident occurred was eventually renovated and renamed the Lieutenant Martinez Communications Center, serving as a permanent reminder that all service members, regardless of gender or rank, deserve to serve in an environment free from harassment and assault. The base became a model for military installations worldwide, proving that cultural change was possible when leadership demonstrated zero tolerance for predatory behavior. Forward Operating Base Phoenix had lived up to its name, rising from the ashes of a toxic culture to become something better and stronger. The three generals who intervened that night had saved more than just one lieutenant. They had saved the integrity of the entire installation and set an example that would protect countless service members in years to come.